Move on to Brexit and talk about this in the Financial Times. Boris Johnson's vow to implement Brexit deal by December 2020 is in doubt. He's been out campaigning in Labour-held seats today, pledging to get Brexit done. But this article suggests it won't be possible by the deadline of December 2020 because the new customs arrangements for Northern Ireland won't be ready. Are they right?
No, we got. I think we've got every chance to get this all done. First of all, the 31st of January date that we're trying to get Brexit done means that at that point we are no longer talking about whether we're leaving the EU. We're talking about how we're leaving.
But this is a DEXU document saying it represents a major strategic, political and operational challenge.
Well, I think there's a couple of things in that. I mean, some of the things in terms of where we're having checks and these kind of things.
Oh, you are having checks, are you?
This is where the EU have been talking about checks, and that's things like endangered species and those kind of things. But as the Prime Minister said the other day, what we'll be looking at is there will be declarations for things that are goods that are moving from the UK through Northern Ireland to the rest of the EU and vice versa. But there's no sense of checks between the UK and Northern Ireland because we'll be leaving the customs territory. You know, in our own customs territory, we'll be all leaving as a UK together.
I think we'll get some clarity on this from Fact Check Joel. Let's talk about the contradicting claims, Joel, surrounding the issue of checks. Take us through them.
Hi, Joe. I've been looking at something Boris Johnson said yesterday, and it's very similar to what was just said there in the studio. He said that under the terms of his withdrawal agreement, there is no question of there being checks on goods going from Northern Ireland to Great Britain or from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. And he said later, there won't be checks. I've been looking at an impact assessment that the government published a few weeks ago. This sets out what would happen to Northern Ireland under the terms of the government's withdrawal agreement. It says that Northern Ireland would follow some of the EU's customs arrangements and would also stay in a regulatory zone following EU rules on food products and manufactured goods. That means that Northern Ireland will be following two different sets of EU rules, both on customs and on regulations. The document then goes on to spell out the consequences of that. On customs, it says that in terms of goods going from Northern Ireland to Great Britain, some practical information will need to be provided electronically on the movement of goods. And the Brexit Secretary, Stephen Barclay, has previously said that that could be a form called an exit summary declaration that businesses would need to fill out. And then in terms of goods going in the opposite direction from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, the document says that there would need to be import declarations and also entry summary declarations. And there would also be customs tariffs in the case of goods going from Great Britain to, say, the Republic of Ireland via Northern Ireland. That particular point the Prime Minister did actually seem to concede in his comments yesterday. I think this is partly a semantic dispute. So Boris Johnson might be thinking that filling out a form is different from a cheque, but then others have argued that if forms are being filled out, then presumably they will need to be checked at some point. Otherwise, it's a pointless exercise. So that's customs. Then there's the separate issue I mentioned of goods regulations. Here the document is clearer. It says that goods arriving in Northern Ireland, including from Great Britain, would undergo regulatory checks in accordance with EU rules. So reading this impact assessment, which, as I say, was published by the government a few weeks ago, I think it's hard to maintain the line that there won't be any checks on goods under the terms of the government's withdrawal agreement.
Joel, thank you. There will be more checks, won't there, Paul?
Well, I think that you talk about there will be electronic forms that will move.